So welcome to this last session as part of the this policy seminar in conjunction with the European Commission, Back into Business, SME Support Ecosystems for Cultural and Creative Sectors. So this current discussion here is really to try to bring a few of the different pieces together and to think about how cultural and creative sectors can be really drivers of regional development strategies. And, you know, the last couple of days, there's been a really strong focus, of course, on innovation and entrepreneurship and finance and issues associated with the business ecosystem. But also a number of other topics have come up that are very important for regional development, which hit on issues of the green transition, inclusion, etc. So I think we've got a lot of really interesting topics to discuss as we try to bring it all together, as the title of this session highlights. So if I could just ask to show the panelist slide here. So I'll just do a brief intro and just to help make sure that we kind of get audience participation and get in there as well. We're going to split this up into sort of three segments here. So first, we're going to welcome Laurent de Mercier from the Unit for Smart and Sustainable Growth in the Director General for Regional and Urban Policy in the European Commission. And Laurent is going to be able to explain to us a lot about the different approaches to smart specialization, as well as some of the EU support packages and experiences on that front. We'll have also in this first session, Pierluigi Sacco, who you might have heard in other parts of the discussions in the last couple of days, who is a senior advisor within the OECD, but has also been an advisor with the European Commission and with several, is affiliated with several prestigious universities around the world. We'll also, and so we'll do a first conversation with Laurent and Pierluigi. We'll then have Rita de Grave, who you've been able to hear about in some of the other sessions, and we'll give her a chance in a moment to wrap up what she was saying in the last session. And she, as Senior Policy Advisor in the Department of Culture, Youth and Media in Flanders, is one of the reasons we're virtually here in Flanders today. And in this second part, where we are still in Europe here, we have Michal Hladký, who is responsible for creative industries, Kosice in Slovak Republic. And this is a city that's been a capital of culture and has a lot of exciting things that we look forward to learning about. And then in the final segment, we have a couple of guests joining us from both North and South America. So thank you for coming up, getting up early for us today. So we have Adriana Gonzalez-Hazic, who is within the Ministry of Culture in Colombia, and in particular in the subsection on creativity in the orange economy. And she'll be able to tell us a lot about really exciting work being done in Colombia on this topic. And just as a reminder, Colombia is the 37th member of the OECD that joined last year. And then we'll also be joined by Sarah Chester, who is co-director of the Carolina Textile District in the United States, and some exciting information there on both the use of creativity in both economic development, but also in a sense from a social economy perspective. So maybe what we'll start before Laurent and Pierluigi, we jump into the debate with you. I just wanted to give Rita a couple of seconds to finalize her comments. I think you were in the middle of some closing remarks in that last session. So Rita, please feel free to jump in, and then I'll take it back to Laurent and Pierluigi.
Yes, I guess you see me now because I don't see my image. So, all right, thank you, Karen. Well, we live in digital times, but it's not always easy to have the necessary connection to continue in a digital conference. So what I was saying is that in some way we all have multiple government levels, and from the Flanders point of view, this means that you have policies on the level of cities and municipalities. We also have our regions, and then we have a federal layer. And all these levels develop new instruments, and sometimes these instruments are conflicting with each other. So it is very important that you have a good collaboration with all these levels. And from the Flemish point of view, we think it is very important to have intermediaries who are familiar with these levels and who have the power to combine them all, because when you look at the ecosystem, you see these different levels, and as a policy level, it is very hard to combine all this. But when you work with intermediaries, they have the possibility to act on these levels. For example, when we talked about Cultuurloket and their collaboration with Hefboom, for Cultuurloket, it is very important that they don't stay in their offices in Brussels. No, they are present in multiple cities throughout Flanders. So it is very important to be there where the creative activity is done. So that was what I wanted to share with you all, Karen.
Great, thanks so much, Rita, for the wrap up there on the prior session. And so now we'll maybe remove the slides and jump into the discussion with Laurent and Pierluigi in this first segment. And I just let the audience know that you're welcome to type in as you hear things that you find interesting and want to get more information about. Feel free to put it in the question segment here, and then we'll try and pull it up as we engage in the discussion. So first, welcome, Laurent. Thank you so much. Looks like you're joining us from your office there in Brussels. So thank you so much, Laurent, for being with us today. And I mean, I think first, if you could first explain to the group a little bit about the European Commission's Smart Specialization Strategy and how it's implemented by regions, and just give a bit of a flavor and of an overview, and then go into a bit more how you're seeing culture and creative sectors in the context of this very important Commission policy.
Okay, thank you, Karen, for your welcome. Can you see and hear me? Okay, so good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. So yes, a few words about smart specialization for those who are not familiar with it. So it's about placing greater emphasis on innovation and having an innovation-driven development strategy in place that focuses on each region's strength and competitive advantage. So smart specialization strategies were introduced as policy framework into the EU cohesion policy about 10 years ago, and they became an ex-ante conditionality for receiving the ERDF investments. ERDF is the European Regional Development Fund. So for receiving these investments in research and innovation during the programming period 2014-2020. So it started, smart specialization strategies were requested from regions and member states in order to receive these funds starting in 2014. And so smart specialization, it's a place-based approach. It works with the identification of strategic areas for intervention on which resources will be concentrated. So this identification of priority works with the analysis of strengths and potential of the economy. It works also with a bottom-up and dynamic process, which is called the entrepreneurial discovery process, EDP. So it involves wide stakeholder involvement. So what we call the triple or even the quadruple helix with public authorities, business, academic research, and also civil society. And so it's very important that these smart specialization strategies help to avoid uniformity in regions and duplication in regional investment goals. So in terms of figures, in the last programming period, 2014-2020, about 40 billion euros came from the ERDF to finance research and innovation projects linked to smart specialization strategies. A little less, around 200 national and regional smart specialization strategies were developed in Europe, and the majority of these strategies, maybe around 150, relate to cultural and creative sectors. In most, these strategies, they mention the cultural and creative sectors in a majority of member states, maybe 22 member states. And moreover, there is also an interregional partnerships which was launched recently between several European regions which work on their complementary S3 priorities, including cultural and creative industries. So this was some rather general information about smart specialization, but indeed the cultural and creative sectors are a major asset for the economy in terms of innovation, growth, creation of jobs, and the EU regions have already been encouraged to build on these assets for the strategies for smart specialization. And we see the result, as I said, about 150 regions strategies have this sector inside them. And some regions have been very good at using this potential as a way to promote socio-economic development. So making the best use of EU structural funds. And so the challenge is for the cultural and creative sector is more and more to promote the emergence of creative ecosystems throughout the EU, to develop creative environment and promote traditional cultural assets like cultural heritage, touristic destinations, dynamic cultural institutions, and to stimulate the development of creative businesses. And so the cohesion policy can help for that. And I will end my this general this topic. I will give some general. Sorry, I will list some general advice on building smart specialization strategies, which can apply to, of course, to the cultural and creative sectors. There is, first of all, building a smart specialization strategy works with a sound diagnostic. So it means that there should be an objective analysis of the situation of the regions in terms of research, innovation, industrial structures, skills, and human capital. And there should be also mapping of regional assets. So the analysis should examine the gaps, the barriers, and the potentials for future economic development. It works also with defining priorities. So indeed, the smart specialization strategy, the S3, should look at the domains, areas, and economic activities where regions have a competitive advantage and have the potential to generate knowledge-driven growth. So the number of priorities can vary from region to region. And it's important to note that a smart specialization field or area should be able to match knowledge domains with market potentials, possibly in view of a niche market, because smart specialization involves not only radical innovation, it's not only for the main innovative regions, but for all regions exploiting niches by innovating in traditional fields. So these smart specialization fields are often at the cross-section of different sectors, technologies, or knowledge domains. And last but not least, the governance is very important because the policymaker should involve all types of innovation actors, businesses, technology, competence centers, university, public agencies, venture capitalists, civil society, and so on. this is the entrepreneurial discovery process. It's a dynamic and bottom-up. It's not enough to conduct simple surveys among these actors. They have to be concretely involved. It's really a participatory leadership process, and it needs to be conducted throughout the programming period. It should not be stopped, and it should continue. And also, we can mention synergies with other financial resources. The regions should look at synergies with other regional, national, or EU funding in order to enable the cultural and creative sectors to benefit fully from this support linked to smart specialization strategy. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Laurent, for that. And I think it's, it's important, some of the points you raised about how this helps with doing a diagnostic in order to assess what are your assets, and especially also the thing you mentioned about the sort of cross-sectoral element, because it's really, with culture and creative industries, there's really a very important cross-sectoral element to help with other parts of the economy. And I think that was, part of our discussions as well yesterday, these important cross feeds. And I think also another point that you raised that I think is pretty interesting is the fact that, we talked also a little bit in the conference about the sort of connecting local ecosystems and this interregional efforts that are part of the funds in order to promote that knowledge sharing from one local ecosystem to another, which has been said, I think, in the last session, has really been dramatically increased through digital means. So this has really been able to support even more, I think, some of these interregional knowledge sharing. In terms, Laurent, of the what are some of the findings thus far? I know you said that around 150 regions have been prioritizing this sector, and I'm just if there are any other studies or other advice you have based on the experiences of having so many regions participate with this prioritization in their smart specialization strategy.
Well, there have been studies more, I think, more on the investment projects which were conducted rather than studies on the smart specialization strategies themselves. And for example, well, it's very important. A very important issue is the sustainability of the investments. So cohesion policy investments should be sustainable. It's a reinvestment for the middle and long term. For example, in the field of cultural sites, policymakers should pay attention to the financial sustainability of investments. These cultural sites should not rely only on public subsidies, but they should benefit from also private incomes, and so this is one. The way of spending the EU funds is very important. It must not be, we say, wasted, and so public policymakers the attention of policymakers is regularly drawn on this. Yeah.
Great, thanks, Laurent. Maybe I will jump to Pierluigi for a moment then. Just, I know, Pierluigi, you have looked at a number of different regional strategies to support culture and creative sectors. And in particular, also the sort of links across sectors. I don't know if you want to add any comments on this issue of sort of how we can best capitalize on culture and creative sectors within these broad regional development strategies.
Yeah, there is generally been a relatively slow take in bringing into smart specialization strategies, cultural and creative industries for real. There have been a few pivotal regions in Europe that have been early innovators from this point of view. But then there's been mostly a focus in smart specialization strategies on when culture was related, for example, in the relationship with heritage and local development and tourism and so on and so forth. Now there is a late but very, very interesting recognition, and I really see that there is a wide and very diverse spectrum of different regions that are moving on this. And I think that probably there are two common aspects. One is, of course, focusing on the upgrading of the technological infrastructure. This is clearly becoming a key issue because we understand that realistically, the top players in the field at the global level have a clear advantage in terms of infrastructure. And from this point of view, we have been relatively slow uptakers. But the second aspect is building digital skills. Because also from this point of view, there is, for example, the digitalization of our societies is still relatively critical from this point of view. We have regions in Europe that have the levels of digitalizations that are far behind any reasonable standard from the point of view of a competitive Europe in this particular regard. But it's interesting that even in the relatively lagging behind regions, for example, in Southern Europe, there are now some late champions that are emerging. And I think that this is particularly interesting and should be encouraged. So the point is, I think, also to build thematic networks across European regions. Of course, the future European programming from this point of view is precious. And I think that, for example, in the new culture cluster in Horizon Europe, there is plenty of space to try and build thematic networks that have to do with this. Also in terms of peer learning and exchange from the point of view of culture and creative industry, but also circulation of ideas and talent. Also because, I mean, if we reach a critical mass of European regions that have a clear role for culture and creative industry in their smart specialization strategies, also access to finance and the capacity to relate more systematically culture and creative industry to some of the main societal challenges at the European level will be certainly increased. So, for example, the new emphasis that Europe is giving to the issues of cultural welfare, mental health as related to culture and creative industry clearly has to do, for example, with the digitalization, because digitalization on one side is enhancing our capacity to connect, for example, to cultural experiences, but also on the other hand, is creating issues from the point of view of social disconnection. So clearly, for example, if we are able to systematize the possible crossovers, also in terms of smart specialization between these new dilemmas that are being created by the structural transition we are in, there is a huge opportunity for expansion of culture and creative industry, strategic opportunities in unexpected directions. But to do this, it's important, first, that some pilot experiences are better flagged as real experiences to learn from, and second, to create thematic networks for peer learning through regions to better coordinate on these issues.
Great, thanks, Pierluigi. And you know, on another front, I think this came up in the G20 discussions as well. The interesting role for the green transition in terms of the culture and creative sectors, and maybe as we think about these holistic views of regional development strategies, could you maybe say a few words about that particular issue and the role for the green transition?
Absolutely. The real problem of the green transition is about behaviors. Because we can do whatever we can in terms of technological substitution and so on and so forth. But the central problem is behaviors. For example, we are focusing now on the role of circular economy in the green transition. Circular economy, just to make an example of where culture can make the difference. You can create value added by buying more goods, and you can create value added by buying more services and experiences. Clearly, for the sake of a circular economy, you should relocate as much as you can, let's say, resource-intensive forms of consumption towards experience-intensive forms of consumption that clearly also have an ecological footprint, but if cleverly designed, much less. So culture, from this point of view, is helping in building an experience economy in which people rely more on the experience side of their consumption bundle to get a certain level of personal well-being and satisfaction. So, for example, having an experience economy in which culture takes a more central role, for example, in consumption habits of people, can be a direct and very important contribution. And this is on one side. On the other side, of course, is sensitizing people towards more responsible behaviors. So, for example, being more careful in terms of non-renewable resources, doing better waste recycling and waste management, or simply, for example, being responsible in terms of, let's say, removing those habits that can be substituted by less economically impactful habits. But to do this, of course, we need a more pro-social attitude for people. People have, in some sense, to empathize more with the interests and the points of view of people that at that moment are just beyond the concern of their own, let's say, consumption choice in that moment. From this point of view, we have learned that, for example, a greater exposure to culture enables people to be more responsible and more pro-social because they empathize more easily into the position of others. And we know this since centuries, because if we just go look back, for example, to the role, let's say, of Greek theater in the functioning of the Athenian democracy in the 5th century before Christ, we see that, for example, in a society like that, the fact that people went to theater made people more empathic when it came to public decision making. I mean, we are still the same people we were at that time. So if we start using more proactively cultural experiences also as a basis to improve the empathization capacity of people after one plus century of narrative in which we have told people all the time that humans are self-interested, that humans are not really interested in common good, that common good is a dilemma. That's not true. Simply, people are sensitive to the social context in which you elicit motivations. In people, there are pro-social motivations and self-interested motivation. But if you elicit self-interest motivation all the time, people will behave accordingly, but it's also the other way around. So from this point of view, I think that one of the real takeaways of these projects of the new European Bauhaus is using in a smart way the cultural cues to invite people to think in terms of a green transition as a framework of their own lifetime choices day by day, not simply in terms of what they will do in 30 years from now, which is the narrative that has prevailed so far.
Thanks, Pierluigi. And you know, I think this also raises some important considerations in terms of infrastructure investments as well, that as part of regional development strategies and how to maybe incorporate the culture and creative sectors in thinking about those infrastructure investments. I have a question maybe for if Laurent, if you're able to join us again, and Pierluigi, a little bit about sort of how you see things going forward and different policies in place to support this role given COVID. And there are, I think, different measures to support the sector overall, and then how this might help with regional development strategies into the future. So if either of you have any reflections on that particular topic, welcome those.
Maybe I can start.
Sure.
Okay, so in the context of the crisis, which hit very hardly the cultural sector, the EU cohesion policy was, I would say, mobilized to help this sector. There were some emergency measures which were taken to, in particular, to help the SMEs. In this, well, general SMEs in all sectors, but particularly in the most hit sectors like culture and tourism also. So that in the under the Next Generation EU, which is the new recovery instrument supporting member states to recover from the crisis, there is a tool called REACT-EU, which is which will provide a cohesion policy with additional funding in 2021 and 2022. And it is aimed especially at the regional sectors which suffered the most. And it will focus on short-term employment schemes, liquidity support to SMEs, and also support to the green and digital transition, because it's not only emergency short-term measures, it's also measures to prepare the transition. And on the longer term, the cohesion policy and particularly the ERDF will continue to offer plenty of opportunities to the cultural and creative sectors. Smart specialization will play an even greater role in cohesion policy. It will be what we call an enabling condition for ERDF investments. And the scope of smart specialization strategies will be broadened because traditionally it focused on mainly on research and innovation, but it should cover also digitization, SMEs, and skills and skills, specialized skills. So and there is also a thematic concentration. In other words, a majority important part of funding, ERDF funding should go to innovative projects linked to smart specialization strategies. So concerning the cultural sector, innovation and uptake of new technology for culture can be supported, as well as the growth and competitiveness of SMEs in the cultural sector, the development, testing, and piloting of new digital services, products and solutions, for example, for the digitization of cultural heritage. And last but not least, the development of skills linked to smart specialization. So more generally, there are plenty of opportunities for the cultural sector under cohesion policy, under there will be a broader focus for concerning innovation, and there will be a stronger focus for intangible assets. I think this can be very interesting for the cultural sector, and also a reinforced role of the entrepreneurial discovery process as an ongoing process to design smart specialization strategies. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Laurent. So for those regions in Europe, you've heard about some of the opportunities that you can build on even more in the next programming period. Pierluigi, do you have any other reflections on this issue of how to think about regional development strategies and the role of culture and creativity in a new way as a result of COVID?
First of all, I think that the good positive message that is arriving also from this webinar is that Europe is really spot on from this point of view. We have seen also in the previous sessions that there is now an unprecedented range of measures that are going to be implemented, and this creates really a sort of sea change from this point of view. The point is that we have to use this wisely, and also considering on one side the European focus, but also the global context in which we are embedded. I think that the crucial issues to be solved at this point are, first, inclusion. We have a serious problem of inclusion as a consequence of COVID. On one side, from the part of the public and digital poverty, because this is clearly a new, very pernicious form of poverty that we have to tackle, because really the forms of exclusion in a post-pandemic society that derive from poor digital resources could be much worse than what we are accustomed to in a society like the one that we are preparing. And secondly, the issue of inclusion from the point of view of artists. Artists and creators more generally are losing a lot of negotiation power in this particular context. This is creating a lot of frustration, some cases even rage, and this is perfectly justified because in the end, it's they are the powerhouse. I mean, we are building on their own work and energy, and without them, nothing that we are discussing here makes any sense. So from this point of view, it's extremely important to develop new sustainable business models that enable artists to do their job, but in ways that make sense in this new particular context. On one side, this has to do with, of course, helping artists to develop the skills for also, of course, self-entrepreneurship and a better possibility of capitalizing what they do. But on the other hand, they cannot do everything. On the other hand, it's very important for us to find the new formats, to find the new models, and to create the context for the flourishing. And we always have to remember, especially now in the crisis, that we have to do with micro businesses. So of course, being very small, you cannot pretend that you cannot ask them to work as a full-fledged organization and fully manned. And the final point is also the importance to consider, let's say, the peculiarity of cultural innovation. Cultural innovation is not just like any kind of innovation. It's different. It's very much cross-sectional. Sometimes comes from unsuspectable sectors like the subsidized ones, like the museums or the visual arts or the most experimental performing arts that sometimes are real cradles of new provocative ideas that can flourish into very, very interesting industry ideas. But so it's very important that we understand that we need to have a, let's say, special look at the peculiarity of culture and to design purposeful innovation strategies that are tailored to the specificities of these sectors.
Great, thanks, Pierluigi. Before we move on to our next set of panelists, I just want to ask if Laurent and Pierluigi, you have any other remarks you wanted to make in this segment before we get into a deep dive of some very particular regional strategies or national approaches to regional and local strategies.
That's
all set? Okay, all right, great. Well, thank you so much, Laurent, Pierluigi, for this sort of big picture overview of from an EU policy perspective and also just a regional development policy perspective in general and some of the changes that maybe COVID has brought on that front. I think I think the next presenter will be Rita. And Rita, I think you're going to give us an overview of the strategy in Flanders. And I should just also mention that, Rita, you had the opportunity to present this to the OECD's Local Employment Economic Development Committee as well, but just before COVID. So look forward to having you take the floor and to go through your very comprehensive strategy for Flanders.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm going to tell something more about our long-term strategy to foster entrepreneurship and additional finance in the cultural sector. And if we go to the next slide, yes, ladies and gentlemen, we have been talking a lot about the cultural and creative sectors. Well, I think it is important that I show something so that we know what we are talking about. And the painting here on the screen is the Ghent altarpiece. Perhaps you know it, and it is about the mystic lamb, and you see the mystic lamb at the bottom panel in the middle on the altar, and there you can find it. This is a 15th century painting by the old master Jan van Eyck, and it is really famous, and you can admire it in the cathedral of the city of Ghent. So perhaps you already saw it. If not, I invite you to do so. Of course, this is very important for the local development because a lot of tourists come to see this altarpiece, but that is not the reason why I show it, because it's a very beautiful example of what cultural heritage is, but this is also a very fine example of intangible cultural heritage. And this has to do with the panel on the left at the bottom. And on the next slide, we can see it in detail. So what is so special about this panel? Well, the panel on the left, you see men on horses. These are the righteous judges. And the back side of the panel is St. John the Baptist carrying the mystic lamb in his arms, and he's pointing his finger to it. Well, what is so special about it? Well, this panel has been stolen in the 1930s. And after a few days, the back panel was returned, but we never found the original bag, never. But the funny thing is that the search for this panel is very active. Even after almost 100 years, a lot of theories and a lot of publications are published in Flanders, because every inhabitant of Ghent dreams of finding the panel back. And this is also very important for the local development. And why do I say this? Well, last year at the beginning of 2020, a big blockbuster exhibition opened its doors in the city of Ghent, and all the rare pieces and paintings by the artist, they were all brought to Ghent for a magnificent exhibition. And so it was really once in a lifetime. I had the honor of visiting this exhibition, but then what happened in the middle of March, COVID came, and the doors of the exhibition had to be closed, and they never opened again. So needless to say, what the impact was for the local development of the city of Ghent, they were all prepared to receive thousands and thousands of visitors of this exhibition. So that was a big catastrophe. And that brings us to the topic of today. And if we go to the next slide, I will tell something more about what we mean when we talk about culture in Flanders. And we talk mainly about three big areas. It is about social cultural work for adults and youth. It is about the arts, and it is about cultural heritage. You all know what the arts are and what cultural heritage is about, but social cultural work for adults and youth is something unique for Flanders. You don't have this in other parts of Europe. It has certain similarities with, for example, city making, or certain elements from, let's say, social economy, but it is definitely not about social economy nor about city making. It is a very typical form of organizing and organizing activities with a lot of people, you know, sometimes very similar, sometimes very different. And this is something specific for Flanders. Well, when we talk about culture, we are talking mainly about a not-for-profit surrounding, even though we are part of the broader cultural and creative sectors, even though that in the definition of the cultural and creative sectors, the social cultural work is not included, yet we treat it as a part of that cultural side. As I already said this afternoon, in Flanders, we are still making a difference between the cultural side and between the creative side. But in order to make sure that for us, from a cultural point of view, we are talking about one ecosystem, we chose the term cultural and creative sectors and not industries. And we do this very consequently in order to make sure that the cultural side is part of the CCS. And if we go to the next slide, I can tell something about a very important turning point, and that was in 2014, where we had a very important change in the cultural policy on the cultural and creative sectors. And in the next slide, I can tell more about it. Back then in 2014, we did some observations, and we saw that there was and still is a very nice generic policy to foster entrepreneurship, but it is based on economic KPIs. It is based on economic growth, on economic added value, and on commercial businesses in general. So there are a lot of very nice policy instruments for the creative commercial side, but at the same time, there is a pitfall, because culture was not meant to be part of that bigger approach. And at the same time, culture was constantly urged to become more innovative and entrepreneurial, yet at the same time, they had no schemes matching that typical DNA, and they were working with modest revenue models. So if you allow me to make the comparison, they had to go to war without weapons, and that is seldomly a success. Yes, and when we turn to the next slide. Yes, and that was the start of the development of a strategy for supporting the cultural side of the CCS. And after having chosen for the term CCS instead of industries, we also chose for the term additional finance instead of alternative finance, because in Flanders, this was perceived as an alternative for the traditional way of giving subsidies to the cultural sector. So they were very vulnerable to that term, and that is why we use the term additional. Perhaps those who have heard the testimony of Cultuurloket and Hefboom might have noticed it. So we constantly talk about additional finance. We combined it with a lot of research, and Isabelle de Voldre, who was one of the experts of the first debate this afternoon. She was the researcher of a lot of research we did. We also did a lot of consultation and debate with the cultural sector, and this all ended in an official policy paper with the title Long-Term Policy on Additional Finance and Entrepreneurship for the Flemish Cultural Sector. And this policy paper is still very, very important, because now we are at the beginning of 2021, and I can say that it has been implemented for 100%. And if we go to the next slide, I can tell more about it. So here you see some pictures of that big debate. It was a day of debate and a lot of interesting conversations. And what is the policy about? And if we turn to the next slide, we see 4 big policy measures. And it seems to be very simple, and yet it is simple, but you have to deal with it in a very consequent way so that everyone is into the story. Where the first policy measure is an office for cultural entrepreneurship, and it was presented yes, an hour ago with the name Cultuurloket. And the task for Cultuurloket is to give advice and training on all aspects of entrepreneurship and strategic management. And they have a very important brokerage function between people who are looking for advice and coaching and the ones providing it in the market. So that is a very important function. A second policy measure is about cultural credits. It's about microcredits without collateral. This was also presented an hour ago, and before that we worked with bigger loans, but we saw no, we have to have an instrument in the field of microcredits, and up to 15,000 euros when the application comes from individual, what we call cultural workers. It is interest-free, up between 15,000 euros and 100,000 euros. It is with low interest rates. And the important thing is that it is always without collateral. The collaboration between Cultuurloket and the culture credits is crucial in order to make them work. And this collaboration is very successful. A third policy measure is a policy on innovative cross-sectoral collaboration. And yesterday our scheme was presented. And then we have a favorable tax policy for culture. And this has not been presented today, but that will be for a next occasion, so no problem. Let's say until March 2020, this was really functioning very well. And if we go to the next slide, you see what I want to to refer to, and that is the effect of COVID. So normally there's another slide coming after this one. Yes. So before March 2020, we really had a boost of entrepreneurship in the cultural side of the CCS, and these 4 pillars were interacting splendidly, and this all came to a standstill in the middle of March last year, because all of a sudden, all the entrepreneurs with a lot of contracts were faced with the term force majeure. We all know the term force majeure. We all know that it is part of a lot of legal documents, but when COVID came, all of a sudden everyone asked, what are the legal consequences of this term? Will I be held accountable for not having anticipated something we could not anticipate in any way? Can I be sued? What if my public gets ill? So a lot of fear for unemployment and a lot of fear for bankruptcy. And when we turn to the next slide, we return to these 4 policy measures. Of course, we have developed on the Flanders level a lot of instruments, too many to talk about here, but in relation to the 4 pillars, we can say that we immediately chose for extra support for the 2 upper policy measures. We asked the Office for Cultural Entrepreneurship to provide extra support and advice for what we call the second line advice on COVID measures. When you see what happened last year, and I also talked about multiple policy levels, you see that all these levels started to develop measures, but the interpretation and the legal consequences of these measures were not always easy. And that was the task for the Office of Cultural Entrepreneurship. And today they are still working on that. It is very, very necessary because there is no second line to match with the questions. So you see the second line is being developed by Cultuurloket. We also chose to do something about the need of cash. A lot of cultural institutions had experienced a cash burn and had severe problems. And in order to solve that, we started working with COVID interest-free subordinated loans with not only was it interest-free, but it is also with a grace period in order to give the sector oxygen to survive the COVID. Today, we are still in the middle of this COVID crisis, but we hope we can help the sector survive. We will see how it will develop. And I would like to end my story with the next slide. And when I showed the panel, the Ghent altarpiece, it was open. Now this is what it looks like when it is closed. And what is remarkable, that is that these panels have been restored, and the people who did it, they removed all the layers and they came to the original layer, and the richness of the color is really very exceptional. And when you see the angel in the middle on the left, the wings really look like the inner part of a fig. So I should say, dear ladies and gentlemen, if you have the opportunity of visiting the cathedral in Ghent, please do so, because there you see what we are all working on day by day. Thank you very much.
Great, thanks so much, Rita. I'll just remind all of our participants to, if they could start putting any questions they have into the question and answer function, and we're going to take questions for Rita and Michel after his presentation. So please feel free as you start to think about, your questions for how Flanders has been implementing this, and also the interesting adaptations that had to be made in order to support the sector during COVID. And any questions on that, please feel free to put those in the function here so that we can get answers to your questions. I think we'll move on now to our second case study in this segment. So. Michel, great to have you with us. And you've got around 10 minutes or so, if you could, to give us the big picture on a lot of the activities that you're doing, because I know you're involved in really building up on the heritage of being a capital of culture, and you're involved in many different initiatives and programs. So really look forward to hearing about the examples from Kosice, Michel.
Okay, thank you very much. So I'm not. Can we have it? Okay, thank you. Kosice was European Capital of Culture in 2013. Can we have a next slide? And we really learned in that period over 5 or 6 years of development of such a big culture project, how to deal with the infrastructure, how to build community, and how to approach big culture projects. Next slide. And we really started from the scratch, entering the old military warehouses. Next slide, please. Finding empty spaces. Next slide, please. And we converted it into something which is the biggest cultural infrastructure in Slovakia, called Kasarnia Kultur Park, over 12,000 square meters for culture. Next slide, please. And it became really a landmark in the city. Next slide, please. And we also got into suburbs, and we converted some of the smaller infrastructural buildings into community and culture centers. And those are spread around the city center. And we also converted abandoned swimming pool into Kunsthalle, which is now significant place for arts and culture. Next slide, please. So this all really convinced decision makers and also, let's say, people or citizens that culture has the role to play in the urban or regional development, and it's something which is really significant for the city. And they decided not to close the shop or the organization, and we converted to something which is now called Creative Industry Kosice. Next slide, please. And we are, as a legacy of the organization, responsible for development of culture creative sectors in the city and region, and also, let's say, helping on the national level. So we are very much focused on education, professional development, mobilities or internationalization of the CCIs, building partnerships, helping to innovate, and also helping city and the region to work on the strategic development. Next slide, please. So it's very much about most of our projects or programs are international. So we use international, European, and also global knowledge to bring it here to the city and help entrepreneurs and people working in culture creative industries to develop their businesses or develop their ideas or organization. Next slide, please. And this is something which is non-financial help to the sector, but we also have some means to help people, especially now in the crisis. We decided that we open up a grant scheme for individuals to helping them survive. So we supported more individual artists than ever in the Kosice history. Next slide, please. So those are just a few selected faces of local artists or people working in arts and culture we supported. Next slide, please. But we also work internationally. We have a lot of networks we are part in, and a lot of partners around Europe and the world who can host our entrepreneurs, our creative people, our artists. We also host artistic residencies. Next slide, please. And since 2011, more than 200 people traveled from and to Kosice thanks to our mobility programs. We are also part of different networks, helping us to access state-of-art policy level on the EU. like European Creative Business Network. You can recognize Pierluigi there. And what we really yes, next slide, please. What we really strongly believe, because in the last 10 years, there has been a tremendous development in culture and arts thanks to European Capital of Culture program. And digital sectors evolve separately. And we in Kosice have the biggest IT or ICT digital cluster in Slovakia, hosting around 60 to 70 companies. And we came with a narrative that creativity and digital technologies should unite for innovation in any other sectors. So first of all, we thought what would be the umbrella narrative for this. Next slide, please. And we decided we're going to join UNESCO Creative Cities Network because they have a Creative Cities cluster in media arts. So we joined in 2017. Next slide, please. And City became a UNESCO Creative City in media arts. And this gave us a leap to global network. Next slide, please. And we start seeing like Arts Electronica partners. Next slide, please. South by Southwest. Next slide, please. Karlsruhe, ZKM, who are the leading organization in the world in terms of connecting arts and digital technologies. And so we would like to benchmark also our events to them and finding the connection. So we established in 2016 Art and Tech Days, which is the platform connecting arts and technology and introducing this concept not only to decision maker but also to wider public. Next slide, please. Helping us bringing knowledge. Next slide, please. From around the world, US, Asia. Next slide, please. And also Europe, talking about the topics like artificial intelligence, machine learning, and how digital development, technological development connected to arts could bring more advanced for cities development, but also how it should, or how we should, let's say, tackle the responsibility which lies in this new technological development. So culture could embrace this and could, let's say, educate and bring different points of view to the technological development as well. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. And so I would emphasize this again. So this is something we truly believe in, that for Kosice, the real future lies in those two sectors, helping all other sectors to innovate. So using creativity, using digital technologies, helping, next slide, please, in our sense, to increase or strengthen the citizen experience and well-being in the city when it comes to how you're gonna use those two sectors in connections for better regional or urban development. Next slide, please. So we devised just recently a new strategy for CCIs, focus on excellent life, so life satisfaction and also the well-being, the infrastructure, not only the tangible one in terms of buildings, but also in terms of connections and let's say capacities in the city in terms of talent, and also helping internationalization and partnership buildings, not only within the culture, but cross-sectorial. So those are the main points. Next slide, please. And to help execute all these, we've been awarded by Urban Innovative Action Project for next 3 years, which is now called Kosice 2.0, where we're going to introduce the, let's say, the ecosystem. Next slide, please. For the innovation to create a new, better services for the citizens. So it's very much about the service development or service design. It's very much situated about the central point, which is the Citizen Experience and Wellbeing Institute, which is going to, let's say, set the methodology, collect the data, and use arts and culture and, let's say, intervention in the public space as a means for experimentation in terms of public space development, let's say, communication with the citizens, interaction, when the main goal is to make a complete ecology or ecosystem based on education. So we're bringing special educational programs or trainings for the officers at the city level, also for the citizens. We're also working with the university. There will be a program developed which is specialized in data analysis and helping and using artistic interventions and data visualization as a mean for better communication of decision makers to the wider public. And also there will be a physical space with a co-working and support of the entrepreneurs using collected data from the city, expressing or addressing challenges from the city level and helping the city creatively address cities' problems and cities' challenges on whichever level. So thank you very much. 10 minutes.
Great, thanks, Michel. And I see you went pretty quick through that big slide deck there. I was a little nervous when I first saw it, but you were very effective at helping us really get a nice grasp of the very wide-ranging elements of your approach and how you've really built on that capital of culture experience to raise awareness and really integrate it into so many different elements of the strategy. Rita and Michel, maybe just a question to each of you. Given that you've had these really extensive experiences in helping to develop these strategies and implement them, could you each perhaps give one piece of advice to another region that's thinking about how to incorporate culture and creative sectors in a more integral way into their regional development strategy, something that you've learned having worked on this that you might want to recommend to others so that they can benefit from your extensive experience?
Well,
yes, Michael, please do.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. In my experience, when I look back, I see that it is a lot about semantics. It's about storytelling, and very often you see opposition coming, and this has to do with a kind of discourse. Cultural and creative people are very, very vulnerable for these terms. So try to find a discourse which is fine for both the target sector and the policymaker. And the second advice is patience. You have to wait for the right moment, and this can take a while. And you have to see that opportunity and then jump into it before the opportunity, the window of opportunity is closed, let's say. So that is the way I work, and it is always good to have a kind of international acknowledgement for what is happening. That makes it much easier to develop the strategy broader and to deepen it. So that I can give as advice.
Yeah, thanks. I need to follow up on that because I wanted to say that language is #1 problem. So different stakeholders understand different terms differently. So in our case, what worked is that our organization is the city-based NGO and operate as an intermediary organization. We have very close connection with the sector, so directly supporting them, connecting them, understanding, and can translate those needs to the policymakers because they are our stakeholders as well. So they established us. So that's one thing. So like a patience and also the translator or intermediator, and the other advice is the first-hand experience. So in our case, what really worked is that politicians and those decision makers and stakeholders from businesses, what we always tried to bring them as close as possible to the change or to the activities happening, so they can see firsthand what's going on and they understand. And so later on, so this is in the case of Kosice, what happens that after 7 years of preparation and execution of the eco projects, we always find persons on a different levels, if be the ministry or regional government or city level government, who had never thought that something like this could work. They experienced the change and now they are very keen to support any crazy ideas when we come up with, because they already have this experience. So this is very important to see, because when you speak, it's again just a language problem. When they read it, it's language problem. So they have to experience it firsthand.
Great, thanks so much to both of you. Those are really interesting pieces of advice, because it's true, the not only trying to get people around a common understanding of what you're talking about, but also to experience and live it, which I think is a very interesting lesson for us to take away for our work here at the OECD on this issue. And so I think what we'll do is we'll now turn to the Americas, and then maybe at the end, if folks have any other final comments that they want to make. Oh, I just saw, sorry, I apologize. I just see there was one question to you, Michal, as to where the funding for the current activities come from. If maybe you could just answer that before we hit.
I was about to type the answer, but yeah, I can say that we are like 40% of our budget comes from the city. So city, as they establish us, they fund us 40%. And the rest of the funding comes from the EU funded projects, national schemes. We also have our own activities which create income. So it's really like portfolio, or the income streams are very diverse. And it's our goal to maintain the cash flow.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that. Great. So now we're going to turn to Adriana Gonzalez-Hassig, and really welcome you here to the discussion today. And I know you've been a key player in helping to put together this really exciting strategy that you have in Colombia to support the orange economy, and in particular also the strategy to get lots of local and regional actors to really implement this through a system of development zones. So Adriana, I look forward to your presentation, and you can just cue colleagues to do the slide deck for you.
Thank you very much, Karen, and thank you very much for the invitation to our your OECD team. Yes, so in the different scheme that from the one who was presented to us by Michal, we have in Colombia now a particular mindset in the government, where we have an orange economy development policy. This means that things that were private initiatives or very local initiatives, now that, for example, the one that Michal exposed to us today, now have a stronger, broader national frame for a development. At the beginning of the government in 2018, we had a goal to set up 5 creative districts, which we have called Orange Development Areas. As of today, in 2021, we have already certified 41 districts, and we're looking into 17 districts more. Why? I'm going to explain it to you through this presentation. So, what I was telling you about is ADN, Áreas de Desarrollo Naranja, is the way we call the creative districts in Colombia. Next slide, please. And we have a special definition of the government for this to be located in a specific legal frame. So we have a setting up of these orange development areas. Next slide, please. And then we have a first, like a first goal, first result. And then there's a phase 2, and then we have the monitoring and measurement continuation of the activities. Next slide, please. So we have this definition that what I was telling you about, these orange developing areas have been developed from a very private initiatives. In the beginning, we had cities like Medellin or Barranquilla or even Bogota who had their own initiatives and had a very difficult time finding the streams of financing so that they can have a prosper turnout for these initiatives. Next slide, please. What the Colombian government had created was an article in the National Development Plan so as to incentive these ADNs, and that they have a proper legal framework to define what can and cannot do, so as to create especially tax incentives to encourage the setting up of these ADNs. So as you can see, if we have tax incentives for these landmarks, we need to be very specific on what these landmarks or what these areas can foster or not. So this is what we made this definition, that they strengthen entrepreneurship, creative-based employment, tourism, heritage recuperation, environment and conservation, knowledge transfer, sense of belonging, social inclusion, and citizen access to cultural and creative offer. So this is very interesting because now we have, next slide, please, thank you. So now we have not only urban-based ADNs, but also rural-based ADNs, where we can really, convey interests that are not only urban and that are not only centered on the arts, but also centered on the crafts and centered on heritage in very, diverse areas of Colombia. For those of you who may not know it, Colombia is 3 times the size of France and is divided by the Andes. So we have a very peculiar geography, and we have very peculiar identities within Colombia. So this is something that has been a groundbreaking possibilities for the cultural authorities in Colombia, so that they can foster initiatives in their own territories that cater to what they are specialized into. That may be dance, that may be heritage, that may be pottery, that may be jewelry, that may be tourism. But this has become a crucial element to bring on the table and bring to the equation investors that from the very region can put their money in things other than having sponsoring a sports association, for example. This is really a diversification of what culture can bring to the table to the regions. So the development of an ADN is set up in 2 phases. The first phase is identification of what this area needs. And we have a very, very proper, strong checklist so that the territories can understand what it takes to plan for an ADN. Because sometimes in Colombia, we have the tendency to believe that if we have a government declaration of an ADN, the money is going to come from the national government. And this is not going to be the case. So we need to have a proper work with the authorities, that they properly know and orient this decision with a healthy environment that can afford to receive this ADN. So this takes a while. It's not automatic. It takes between 8 to 10 months, so as to the ADN is declared locally by local authorities within the municipality. So this is the first result, the delimitation and declaration of this ADN. Certain regions such as Bogota is a 15 million people city, have declared 11 ADNs scattered around the city. And so we have 2 or 3 cities that have done the same thing. And one of them is rural. One of them is located in the border with Venezuela. So we have different ways of declaring this ADN, and this is why we have so many. 41. We came from an expectation of 5, and then we turned to 41 already declared. It's a strong interest that we have raised from the municipalities, but also we have the correct instruments of law, so that there is a correct balance between tax rebate and tax refund and tax credit, so that they can really find it interesting. So the second phase is implementation, evaluation, and follow-up. Next, please. I think it's quite next, please. Thank you. I'm sorry. Thank you. That's it. So for the implementation of the Orange Development Area, what we need to do is to be very quick on the follow-up of these development areas, because we need to identify which are the economic activities that are really being taken into account for this area. We have a satellite account of culture in Colombia, which measures quite precisely which one of the economic sectors are the ones taken into account for this economical measurement of the country. And what we do is that we cross-check which of these activities are present in the territory, so that the authorities can have a detailed register of these activities, and also that they really get in touch with the actors of these activities, so that if there are needs for capacity building, needs for infrastructure, needs for stronger streams of resources, of funding, we can get there in a more effective way with the local authorities. So this is the first thing that we need to do in phase 1, but that resonates in phase 2, where with this register is that we can be very effective on the results. Thank you. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. It's off this presentation. I'm sorry. When the ADN is set up, we need to call for a very assertive governance. Normally are the local governments or the chambers of commerce who are helping us champion this task. So this one is of the essence, because since most of it is bottom down and not on the reverse side, we need to have a strong governance so that this is really successful. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Once we define priorities, once we have the real vocation for every single one of these ADNs, what we need, what we start doing from the national government is to induce measurement tools, so that all of the local governments begin to see the real purpose of these orange development areas. since they are doing it on a very enthusiastic level, sometimes the measurement is of the essence for us as a government to transfer this results to the local governments for this to have a long-term and nation-wide interest for our for future governments. Since this was established by one government, we need for it to slowly transfer to the nations, and stop being something induced by one government policy. This is a major challenge for us, but I think that what we have been achieving with the local chambers of commerce and other non-governmental instances is what is helping us to assure a long-term transition for this initiative. So this is what I wanted to tell you today. I have many things, many other things and results to share with you, but this is like the main gist of what we've been doing in Colombia. Thank you.
Great, thanks so much, Adriana. And I think we'll eat a little bit into the closing period so we can have a little discussion afterwards. I just because I have a few questions as well, and but we want to give also Sarah Chester an opportunity to intervene here. And thanks for joining us from the United States. And I think it's really exciting to have also your vision, because you're working also particularly with more rural communities, and also with a very strong inclusion element, I think, in your work. So Sarah, look forward to hearing about the textile district.
Sure, thank you, Karen. Would it be helpful if I went through this in like 4 minutes? I can try to be quick.
You can, we don't want to cut you off, so feel free.
Okay.
If you've got a few things. We'll go over a few minutes. Katia gave me some permission here, so no worries.
Okay,
we want to make
great.
sure we get your great insights here, Sarah.
Great. Well, thank you so much. I'll just jump right in. We are in North Carolina, and we work primarily in rural communities. If you'll move to the next slide. We started the Carolina Textile District back in 2013, and it is a network of companies, and particularly employee-owned companies. So we do a lot around cooperative development. And the Textile District is part of a nonprofit that we've started here called the Industrial Commons. And if you'll go to the next slide. Really what we wanted to do was leverage this growth in the United States of an interest in domestic production. So there were a lot of folks in the creative sector that wanted to produce textile products, sewn goods, apparel, home goods in the United States, but they could not get connected to the supply chain. So what we had here in our rural region of North Carolina was this amazing asset of the textile industry in terms of the manufacturers and producers that could make those goods. Next slide, please. So we formed a network first of the manufacturers themselves. There are now 60 manufacturers that are a part of that, and they really govern the network. And so they determine what is important to them and what their needs are. Last year, they identified a need for skilled trainers. And so we helped launch an industrial sewing program to help build their workforce pipeline. And then they've also, somebody earlier was talking about the circular economy. They have worked together to start a circular economy project where they're gathering their textile waste at a collective aggregation site and turning that waste back into a new yarn to go back onto their floors as a supply chain input. So one of their ideas they've identified for next year is a collective health insurance program, because unfortunately here we do not have very good health insurance. So that's something they wanted us to work on together, is if we could, as a group, most of these companies are small, like 5 to 10 employees, but if we went in together, we would be about 1,000 employees if we could go as a collective for a health insurance program. And next slide. There were a few things in the very beginning of the Carolina Textile District that made us successful, I think, and I just wanted to lift up some of those. The first was just this idea of asset mapping. So we knew that we had a real strength here in our industry of the textile sector and a strong history of textile production. But we took the first year just to kind of map that out and figure out exactly what that looked like. And then we went out and started forming relationships and bringing people into the network. And so a lot of that first year, it was very helpful for us early on to have some support from state and federal grants that gave us some funding early on to get this started. And we knew that we wanted it to be sustainable, financially sustainable, and not reliant on grants for forever. So we started different revenue streams to help make that possible. The third key to our success here was that we had an innovation center that focused on textiles, but is really known globally. It's called the Manufacturing Solutions Center. And they work with brands all over the world, but they just happen to be in our backyard. And so they're real leaders in the textile space for research and development, and also very, very adamant that any IP that they help develop gets commercialized and pushed out to the market. So unlike a lot of universities here, they don't retain the IP, they encourage it being pushed out and commercialized. So working with them early on was extremely helpful. And just moving to the next slide, please. I was talking about the revenue streams that we've built up. So what we've seen here with the textile industry is that, and I just love this map because the little red dots represent the members of the Carolina Textile District, the manufacturing companies, and then the blue dots are the clients who want to connect to those manufacturers and have products made. And it's interesting because you can tell the red dots are sort of clustered kind of in the western end of our state, but they're very spread out, they're in rural areas, and those blue dots are really our urban centers. So you can go across the map and see Asheville, Charlotte, Raleigh, Durham, the Triangle. You can see those urban centers. And so we've created various workshops and intensives where those clients, those entrepreneurs can come into our urban or into our rural communities and learn about manufacturing and be connected to the manufacturing supply chain. So we're really trying to leverage that creative economy. It probably won't ever be here in our town, which is only about 10,000 people, but we can leverage it to bring them in and then to bring that wealth into our community. Next slide, please. So we really had an interesting moment last year during COVID. We felt like it was after 10 years of organizing the Carolina Textile District and all of these manufacturers together, we felt like it was really our moment to kind of put all of that work on display. Next slide, please. We brought together the 40 manufacturers collectively to produce over 500,000 units of PPE, gowns, and masks in particular. It was a crazy few months. We started from scratch. We knew nothing about making masks or gowns. None of our manufacturers had done that before, but because of the long established relationships that were there and our history of working on shared contracts, none of those companies wanted to turn all of their production to PPE, but they knew that they needed to help and they wanted to jump in and help. And so collectively, we were able to produce 500,000 units, and the Carolina Textile District paid out over $2 million to those manufacturers in a time when a lot of their other work was going down and they needed some extra contracts and work. Next slide, please. So we do kind of think about all of these values in everything that we do. And I've heard this word ecosystem a lot over the past hour, which is so lovely. And we tend to describe our work as creating a cooperative ecosystem with really these values at our core. So lifting up worker agency and voice through true ownership, and then really rooting this wealth that's created in our community to increase equity and diversity in these rural spaces where we're working. And that is all I had. We've got the next slide, some information about our organizations. We'd love to connect with all of you more after this. Thank you so much for having me.
Great, thank you so much, Sarah. And I know that there are a lot of different issues you raised, and maybe offline we can do even more, especially some of the mentioned items you mentioned on circular economy. We can feature in some of our work as well. So I look forward to continuing the conversation. And other colleagues, again, the whole purpose of the spirit of these seminars is also to initiate conversations so that others can then connect afterwards and go into more detail. So maybe, Katja, if it's okay, before we close, maybe just a question to Sarah and Adriana. Just for Adriana, maybe given that this is sort of a new policy, And I think it was really interesting. You highlighted a lot of issues about matching the data and also going, city and rural areas. I don't know if you have any, since this is still the beginning of the program, but I don't know if you have any ideas on what are some of the areas where you think you might have particular challenges in going forward, just in case other colleagues on the seminar have some ideas for you.
I think that the biggest challenge for us is the local governance. This is conveying revenue streams from the local areas is very important, because the national government of Colombia doesn't have the money to support this. So there is this crazy enthusiasm setting up this ADNs, but what this entails in terms of revenue streams and in terms of sustainability is a high challenge. So we are relying on the chambers of commerce, who are very powerful and disciplined. But as the post-COVID panorama is so unstable, we don't know how we are going how this is going to continue. What we do know is that there's other 17 regions that are willing to set up an ADN. So we'll see how this plays out. But we need, for this to be visible, we need to have data, strong data, for the regions themselves, so that they are being reassured. I don't know. This is what we have identified so far. The sustainability is at stake at this moment when we're beginning.
Right. Well, it's a very exciting initiative, really throughout the country. So I think all of our participants are going to be stay tuned to learn more as it evolves. Sarah, maybe just I thought was really interesting to give this opportunity to look at how you've been able to really link the creative sector with the more traditional manufacturing sector. And so this is something that I think a lot of regions are looking to do. And it's really exciting work that you've done also in a form of a sort of cooperative and pooling risk, and also with skills upgrading and training. So it really pulls together a lot of different elements of regional development. Is there, any advice to others on this model? Because I think it's a model that really brings together, regional economic development, skills policy, but also a social inclusion element and a social economy element. So really, if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think we just have seen that, ultimately we're trying to eradicate poverty in these rural communities, and poverty is complicated. It's very, very complicated. And so there isn't just one single answer. And so we are always thinking about a systems approach, and you really have to be pulling all of those levers in order to bring about true change in a rural community. One thing that I think has also helped us is really building strong relationships with the local institutions that are here. So our public school system, our community colleges, our universities, local governments, we work very hard to build and maintain those relationships. And I think that's been key for our success. And then just really believing in your own selves. I mean, we have a small community. As I said, there's about 10,000 people here, and maybe just as young women, we tend to kind of doubt ourselves. And so I think we have had to push ourselves to say we have value, and there are people in the country who want to learn from us, and we do have something to share with the world. And so we need to remember that and figure out how to make the most of it in order to bring that wealth from a broader region into our own community to help our neighbors and families and friends here in our region.
Thanks. Well, thank you so much. So thank you, Laurent and Pierluigi, for giving us these big picture overviews. Thank you for Rita and Michelle for giving us some really interesting perspectives on different approaches to regional development, and from a very traditional culture history to also the most technologically focused creative opportunities. And then thanks again to Adriana and Sarah for the understanding of what's going on in different parts of the Americas in terms of supporting regional development above and beyond what we see in Europe, which often is linked a lot with EU programs, but also other initiatives. And the importance of financing, I think, also came up, financing sustainability for a number of these programs. So thank you all so much for this really exciting session. And I know that I have to stop it here because Katja and Maciej from the European Commission are going to give a couple of concluding remarks. But thanks again for all of your inputs in this session this afternoon.
Yep, thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you so much.
So Katja and Maciej, I guess we hand it over to you for the closing remarks.
Yes, Maciej, do you want to go first?
Okay, I can go first. Can you see me and hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So I'm happy to tell a few words on behalf of the Commission and the DG Education, Youth, Sport and Culture as the main partner of OECD in organizing these webinars and in this joint policy project. So first of all, we're very thankful to Flanders for hosting us. Of course, it's not easy to in this digital format have this actual hosting experience, but I think we were all really honored and we're very happy to hear and learn many exciting and interesting examples from Flanders. So thank you very much for this. And then, of course, we're very grateful to colleagues from OECD for their hard work. So Katja, Pierluigi, Benedetta, Karen, and other colleagues, because of course, all of us organizing events and also digital events these days know how much effort and how much energy actually it requires to work behind the scenes tirelessly to deliver this kind of experiences. So thank you very much and congratulations. And of course, I'm very thankful to Commission colleagues that joined us on this occasion from different services. So of course, we had the colleagues joining us, colleagues who work on daily basis on supporting culture and creative sectors, as well as media and audiovisual sectors. But we also could hear examples from colleagues who work on other topics such as education and innovation or regional urban development or research. And this is really great to be able to work together to share this knowledge on the local and regional level from European Union and beyond. But this is also really great to be able to share this knowledge, collective knowledge that we have in the European Commission and in the OECD. So now we're looking forward very much to the next webinar on innovation in public and private funding for culture and creative sectors this spring. While in the meantime, the work continues in OECD on analyzing the participating regions and cities and their policies, strategies, initiatives and support mechanisms they have in place. So we are also very much looking forward in the Commission to find out more from OECD on these analyses. So without further ado, I'm happy to hand over to Katja. And again, thank you very much. I would like to thank also all the speakers and participants for finding the time to join us and all of you for contributing to the discussion. I'm wishing you a nice and above all healthy rest of the day and soon the weekend. And of course, all the materials will be made available on the OECD website. And this is of course very important too, so that we can further share this knowledge and collective intelligence that was floating throughout these two days of this digital event. Thank you very much.
Yes, just to join Maciej in our thanks to Flanders, of course, for the hospitality and to all of our speakers. Well, I guess I have been receiving a lot of feedback from different people asking for a presentation for the key points from this and that one. So, but for us, all your contributions were extremely important for our ongoing research on these issues. Indeed, as Maciej just said, we don't want to keep this quite a crazy rhythm with the each month a new enormous webinar. We'll meet again in the second half of May for the next one. But in the meantime, we'll focus on the work with the regions, with our partner regions. So that will be extremely exciting, and we'll see if we can open some of the work we do with our regions to a wider public as well. But that's the next step. And I would also very much want to thank my colleagues, Benedetta Morari, Anna Ikic, and Mia. Today is Mia's last day with OECD, so thank you so much, Mia, for being with us on your last day. Thank you, and thank you to all the participants, and see you very soon. Good weekend to all. Bye.